Before man walked the earth, it slept for centuries. It is evil. It is real. And it is awakening. Hey freaks and friends, and welcome to the 12th entry of the John Carpenter review series. Today we're taking a look at a film that is going to be John Carpenter's return to the world of horror after two adventures into different types of films with Starman and Big Trouble in Little China. Here we are taking a look at the second entry of the Apocalypse Trilogy. We are taking a look at one of the most ambitious horror films of Carpenter's career. We are looking at Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness stars Pleasence, Victor Wong, Lisa Blunt, Jameson Parker, and Dennis Dunn, plus a very cool sporadic appearance throughout the film by the one, the only, Alice Cooper. And the film was also written by the man himself, John Carpenter, under the alias of Martin Quatermass. This is just a little nod to his love for the sci-fi. Prince of Darkness follows a class of research students who are in a physics class, and they are investigating a cylinder in a church basement that contains a green liquid that is essentially a very much alive embodiment of Satan in liquid form. Probably one of the most unique things about this film, if I'm being perfectly honest. And they come to the realization that if this canister is opened, it could unleash, in a very biblical way, hell on earth. And they need to pretty much find a way to prevent this from happening. It's one of those simple Carpenter plots, but the film itself in presentation feels as if it is anything but. And that is just, again, one of those absolute Carpenter traits where he will take one of the most basic premises and he could wrap one of the most complex films around it, and Prince of Darkness, I find personally, is one such film. This was one that when I first watched it, I had to watch it seriously anywhere between 5, 6, maybe 8 times before I fully was able to grasp what the hell was going on here. It really echoes the film's ambitiousness. It's one that I think John Carpenter had a really great vision for, and it's one that is executed pretty well. But let's get into what I think works and doesn't work about this film. So as previously stated, I do find this to be one of John Carpenter's most ambitious films, and with the concept really, again, very simple premise, but it is elevated in a lot of ways by taking the whole concept of an apocalypse, a very end of days situation, and you take the theological aspect of that and you mix it with the science, and I find that's a really cool blending, and it sort of creates a little bit of a juxtaposition there, because a lot of times in society we find that science and religion, they tend to be butting heads from time to time, and I find that to be an interesting way for this movie to sort of combine that. And in mixing those two sort of facets of thought, you are left with a very thought-provoking film, and it's one that I think really bears repeat viewings. Another thing too that I want to point out is a little thematic thing that I had noticed in the film before, was a little hint of secrecy leads to doom, wherein trying to ignore the evil that is the green Satan jelly, they figure, hey, if we can lock this up, contain it, put it underground, forget about it, everything will be okay. It ultimately does come back to bite the whole world in the ass, but namely the group of characters in this film. I really like the idea too of the shared transmission dream. It really demonstrates the sort of psychokinetic ability of the Satan slime. It's terrifying in a lot of ways too, because first of all, it's just very crude looking footage, And being that it is sent from the future, it sort of gives this sort of feeling of, hey, we're going to show you guys what you have in store to wait on. It's really more like a premonition in a way. It comes off with that sort of energy, but it's an event that has happened, or rather is going to happen, but it's showing it in a sort of past tense sort of thing. And I'm not the most well-versed person when it comes to sort of biblical studies, which is something that is going to have to come up in the context of this film. I think in some ways that the shared dream has sort of that feeling of prophecies and the prophets or something like that, something to that effect. And throughout the film we see only little snippets throughout the dream. It feels as though we are progressing. The further along our characters get in getting to save the day, the date is only slowly being revealed to us as to when this transmission dream is coming from, because it says it's coming from the year 19. Cuts, second time we see it, 199, before ultimately being revealed to be coming from the year 1999. Also, quick spoiler, it does end up changing the final shot of that. I think it's just creepy in a lot of ways, because a community of people are sharing a dream that's probably just a sign of no good, no matter where you are, no matter what situation you're in. That just sounds like some bad gravy right there. I think it's really cool just because, though, it's one of those things that's used as an interesting plot device in the film, and I like how we see the shadowy figure in the doorway of this decimated church. We're initially led, I think, to think that this is going to be at the end of the film, but because they're able to sort of stop this whole Satan thing, it does end up changing the outcome. So we end up seeing a different shadowy figure, and who it's revealed to be, I'm not going to tell you, but if you guys watch the movie, you know. If you haven't watched the movie, I may have spoiled it a little bit, but go back and watch Prince of Darkness. What are you doing here? Go watch the movie and then come back. But I think it's interesting because it has a sort of a Terminator sequel logic. And I stated that previously, that you can only delay the inevitability. You can only hold off Judgment Day for so long. That's something that I feel is sort of captured in that scene, where it's like, yeah, you guys, you may have stopped it from happening this time, but it's still gonna happen. It's just gonna have to change a little bit. We're gonna reroute. The destination's the same. It's just the way we're getting there. Perhaps this movie's strongest suit is the use of dread, suspense, tension, terror. Like, just the little melting pot of that uneasy feeling is something that this film has in spades from start to finish. I think even more so than The Thing, which I had previously said from start to finish is an edge of your seat kind of feeling. This one, it just, again, like I said, feels like it doubles down a little bit. I think because the stakes are closer to home, whereas in The Thing, you know, they're isolated down in Antarctica. Here, this is in a more populated area where this apocalyptic scenario is getting ready to go down. So it really adds a sense of urgency also to that. And when you combine that with the setting of the abandoned church, it just really brings the film up to another level in that regard. And you add the score on top of that, it just causes all this tension to really mount, and it just keeps on mounting until we hit the final point of the film. It just feels like this one, it does a lot less to let up. We don't really have a whole lot of cooling off breathing period in this one, which I think is really cool. It feels like there's a lot less of that to be had here, and I think that further adds to the sort of nightmarish urgency that this film has going on with it. It just, I think, really helps to make this one a lot more terrifying in a lot of ways. And it almost feels like John Carpenter is again able to tap into that universal fear. I think everybody is inherently afraid of an apocalyptic scenario, and something like this where we don't know half the time, probably a lot of people don't know what they want to feel And again, adding the whole theology versus science thing into this, you combine those two elements, and that I think does add to the fear factor a lot too, aside from adding to the intricacy of the plot. One area of the film where I do find myself nitpicking a little bit is the character development. Overall, it does feel a little bit weak in a lot of ways, and I think that just happens to be because it feels as though there are more characters in this film than there should be. I understand when you have a science group, you kind of need a lot of characters, and The Thing had a lot of characters, and that worked perfectly. But those characters were also able to be fleshed out quite a bit better, and I'm not knocking Carpenter here, but I think he just had too many characters that he was trying to incorporate here into the story. There are some that are developed better than others, but there are quite a few that I feel could have been cut out completely. It wouldn't have changed the outcome of the film. You could have combined some characters, but who am I but a mere peasant to try and tell John Carpenter what to do? I think the film still works well, but some of the characters I feel are just a little forgettable. Most of the characters, I don't remember their names no matter how many times I watch this. There are some who stand out. Of course, you have Donald Pleasence as priest. That is straight up what his character is credited as, so we don't have to remember a potentially Irish last name. We have Professor Birack, and those two actors too, Donald Pleasence and Victor Wong, their on-screen chemistry I think is really cool because, again, you have those opposing schools of thought that their characters represent. I think having them work together is really cool, and again, just the way those two actors vibe together on screen, it's definitely the highlight points of the film. If there is a cooling down period from all the tension, it's definitely when those two are together, because it just, I don't know, there's just something powerful about those two together on screen. And another character I want to talk about too is Dennis Dunn's portrayal of Martin. Is it Martin? I'm pretty sure that's his name in this one. His character I initially absolutely hated. His character in this one is starting to grow on me a little bit, but he's still nowhere near as enjoyable as he was in Big Trouble in Little China. I just feel like Dennis Dunn was cast as too much of a funny man in this film. Like, everything he says, he's almost trying to make a joke, it sounds like, and a lot of times his humor just doesn't land for me. His standout joke is still, I think, going to be the...
A Jewish mother goes to the airport to meet her daughter. The daughter steps off the plane with an 8-foot-tall Zulu warrior with a bone through his nose. The mother screams, "You fool! I said a rich doctor!"
That I think is still a pretty funny moment. I know when me and Matt did the show where we were talking about the Apocalypse Trilogy, I had little to nothing kind to say about Dennis Dunn's character, but his character's growing on me. Dollar Tree Tom Atkins, he's not a compelling lead character at all, and I get the feeling he's supposed to be sort of our blank template character, that like because he is so one-dimensional, he feels like, oh, this is supposed to be our vehicle, sort of live out this film vicariously through, except he's a freaking physics student. Most of us are not freaking quantum physics students, but, you know, he's still the blank template. You know, what can I say? He's not the best character, but with this film being the slow burn that it is, I think that is okay. It does make up for these characters being pretty dull. I guess this is probably a case where quantity will outweigh the quality as far as characters go, but I don't know, it's the one nitpick I really have for this film. Everything else I enjoyed pretty well. I do like the homeless characters, the street schizos that are led by Alice Cooper, and of course Alice Cooper's character is like the standout of that group. His character's absolutely freaking terrifying here, and as soon as you see him, you can just tell he is no good. You can already tell this man is going to be up to no good throughout the film, and he definitely has some pretty cool moments. And I guess that's a nice segue into the kills in this film. We actually get quite a few of those, which, watching the John Carpenter films, you find that he does for the most part stay away from that sort of slasher style. There are a couple exceptions. Of course, Halloween, Someone's Watching Me almost has that proto-slasher Black Christmas kind of feel to it. And Prince of Darkness sort of brings that into the fold a little bit through Alice Cooper's character. He's got a couple cool kills where he rushes a guy with a pair of scissors. I still think the zoom in on his hand carrying the scissors, it's a weird little shot, just the way his hand seems to be dancing there. The way he just stabs that guy to death with the scissors, that was pretty intense. Of course, you've got the bike stunt that Alice Cooper had employed on his stage show. I thought was pretty cool. Get a nice neck snapping. I love a neck snap every time. I don't think I've ever seen a neck snap in a film that I've completely hated. So to see one of those in here, I thought was pretty cool. A good handful of the deaths, they're not even directly killing each other. A lot of them are just straight up possessions, and the way it happens is weird, because the first girl who gets really sort of possessed by the devil slime, it just kind of leaks into her mouth. It was definitely Matt, I think, who pointed it out, that
always spraying people and it looks like they're pissing out of their mouth and it's going perfectly in the other person's mouth.
It was absolutely great. This film definitely doesn't skimp on the gore either. There are some pretty gnarly effects. A lot of it really is the Kelly character when we see her. Like, she starts with the little bruise, and of course it starts to turn into like a little branding sort of burn there. The burn mark that, again, looked like the Blue Oyster Cult symbol. Freaking love Blue Oyster Cult, so it's nice to see them getting some representation here. Second time in a John Carpenter film. Absolutely loved that. But the effect on her skin as the sort of pregnancy of her starting to bear the sort of embodiment of the anti-god, as it's called in here, the Satan. The more pregnant she becomes, you start to see the skin just getting real gnarly. And when her face is like completely eroded, that's just freaking gross looking shit. I love it. You got the guy who starts turning into bugs. Body starts falling apart. That still just is almost too much for me. Just a little bit. Still bearable, but holy cow. And the bugs too. There are a lot of bugs in this film. Lots of close-ups on bugs. The effects overall, though, are pretty impressive when you consider that this film was one of Carpenter's low-budget films. This was definitely him returning to the independent circuit completely. So with a diminished budget, the way the effects come out in this film, when you consider everything else they had going on in the film, you can't really knock the effects at all here. Again, passable as hell, minuscule budget, and everything else, well done. The late Gary B. Kibbe, I think we need to talk about him here. This is him making his first appearance in John Carpenter's films as a cinematographer. He's going to be our recurring cinematographer going forward. The majority of the films we're going to talk about going forward, he's going to be a part of. And he definitely makes a good first impression here. A lot of his shots, I feel, are sort of in that same vein that Dean Cundey had. And I don't know, you could make an argument that Gary B. Kibbe's cinematography rivals Dean Cundey. I think you could definitely make an argument for Gary B. Kibbe being a better cinematographer. I think his visual style definitely fits with John Carpenter's vision. The music by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth I touched on just a little bit, but this I think is another one of those scores by John Carpenter and Howarth where it's definitely one of their better scores. I mean, when these guys work together, it's always great. John Carpenter's stuff is always pretty knockout. But this, I think, is definitely one of the better ones all around because of how it fits with the film. The score feels as though it's a representation of how we, the audience, are feeling here. It feels like it's just tracking your blood pressure and your heartbeat as you're watching it. It's definitely a real banger. Again, simple score, but it's definitely one of the more haunting ones Carpenter has going on. I'm going to have to do a separate video, I think, where I talk about the John Carpenter scores, but this one's definitely in the upper echelons as far as John Carpenter's music goes. Just absolutely impressive. Very, very cold feeling. Like, it's one that, when I listen to it isolated from the film, it's one that does make me feel a bit uneasy. Let's take a second to talk about the on-screen talent here for frequent collaborations. We have Donald Pleasence making his third and final appearance in a John Carpenter film. He brings it to the table here. He doesn't have the biggest role, I feel. I feel like we could have had a lot more of his character in here, but there was just enough to make it's worth the price of admission alone. Donald Pleasence in this film. This, I think, is a nice final note for him to go off on in John Carpenter's filmography. We have Victor Wong and Dennis Dunn making their second and final appearances also in this film. They were, again, previously seen in Big Trouble in Little China. So they were there, they were here, We will see them no more in the John Carpenter sphere. We have Peter Jason making his first appearance in the John Carpenter filmography, and he is going to be seen a lot more throughout these films. And when I say a lot more, he's going to be making a lot of appearances going forward. Peter Jason's character in here is the guy, I forget his name, but he is one of the professors. He's the one who's doing the trumpet noises. He's one that I will always remember for being the cop in one of the Cheech and Chong movies. I want to say it was Nice Dreams. He's one of the cops who's scouting the hotel that Cheech and Chong are at when him and the other cop, they're dressed in the drag and shit. And they're the ones working with the Sergeant Stadenko. One last collaborator too, who was only having made 2 appearances, but still frequent enough, that I want to touch on is Dirk Blocker. He's making his second and final appearance here in the John Carpenter films. I neglected to mention him in Starman, where he was one of the cops in there. Here, he is one of the science students. He's the balding guy, the one who looks like he's way too old to be a college student. A lot of people will remember him from being in Poltergeist, and he was apparently also in the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I haven't really watched that show, but I'm sure there's some people watching this who are familiar with it. Here's a picture of his character. Is he any good in there? He was okay in this film. So ultimately, John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness is one of his most ambitious films. Subjectively, I also find it to be among John Carpenter's most terrifying films. But with that said, I don't think I would recommend this to everybody heavily. I feel that the casual horror fan might not be able to get on board with this one completely, and I think that people who need the films to be made very clear what's going on, they might not be on board with this one either. However, if you are into that more supernatural, slow burn kind of film, this is one I would totally recommend to you. If you are a Carpenter fan, you need to see this one, and I think people who like the elevated horror, this is definitely one for them. So at the end of the day, guys, John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness gets 4 Alice Cooper bike rides gone wrong out of 5. As always, want to thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to play with the icons down here, help the channel grow a little bit. What did you guys think about Prince of Darkness? Do you find this film to be a little overhyped? Do you think this is one that more people should see? Would you want to see it be remade? I don't know how I'd feel about that. I think some people say A24 would do a good job remaking it, perhaps. But I'm not here to talk about that right now. But before we all get out of here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you guys don't miss out when we talk next time about John Carpenter's 1988 film, They Live. See you there.
Yeah.